Hi, parents. Alicia Rich, family engagement consultant for the Andover School District. And I am here to talk to you about something that I think is critically important for all of us as parents. Thank you for joining me to talk about how we can talk to our kids about tough topics. So, what is a tough topic? What do I mean when I say that exactly? And really, this varies, but a few of the big ideas that come to mind are listed here. Basically, a tough topic is anything that parents and or children might view as difficult to talk about. It may be because it's an uncomfortable conversation. It may be because it deals with big emotions or content that can be challenging. These might be things like current events, something that your child hears about or sees on the news or learns about in school that's going on in the world. And there might be some hard questions around that. It might be something like illness or death within your family or someone that you know, somehow it's touching your child's life, right? That could be challenging. And also things like divorce, whether it's divorce within your family or again, a friend or someone that they know. These are just some examples of topics that might be tough to talk about with our kids. My goal as we move through our conversation is for you to end this with some really specific usable strategies, things that you can take right away and apply to conversations that you're having with your children at home. So as we dive in, first things first, before we can really help our kids well, we have to take care of some things on our own. And I think it's incredibly important that when we know we're going to have a challenging conversation with our kids, or they have asked us a question about something that feels tough to us, that we do these things first. So first, we need to examine our own feelings about the issue. Chances are you're going to have emotions, you're going to have opinions, right? And those things are good and are fine, but we want to make sure that we're not putting our own stuff on our kids. So we need to take some time to think about how we are feeling and what our thoughts are about whatever issue it is we're going to talk about. And sometimes we can have an opportunity to delay the conversation a bit, but sometimes it is something that is time sensitive and needs to happen before maybe we've gotten a really good handle on our own thoughts and feelings about it. So when I say examine your feelings, it might be something that has to happen pretty quickly, or it might be something that you can take some time with. If you feel like you need some time, it is absolutely okay to say to your child, especially if it's a conversation that, is kind of out of the blue for you, something that they ask you about or that they want to talk about and you weren't really prepared for it, right? It's okay to say, man, I am so glad you asked me that. That's a really big conversation. Could I take a little bit of time and kind of think through that and gather my thoughts? And then can we get back together after dinner tonight, or could we talk tomorrow after school about this? That way I'm just a little bit more prepared when we have our conversation. I think that's a great way to model for your children what you need in order to really walk into that conversation prepared for success. The second thing is, that really goes hand in hand with that. We need to be prepared. So if, it's a current event, we need to have some facts and some information ready to share with our kids. Not that we have to, give a report about all the things that are going on by any means, but we just need to have some reasonably appropriate knowledge about what it is that we are going to talk about. It's also okay to say to your child, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. Can I spend some time doing some research or finding some things out, and then I'll get back to you. And most importantly, remember to trust yourself. You know your child best. You know what they need. You know how they tend to process emotions. And so just trust that you're going to be able to provide exactly what they need as their parent. So how do we decide what to share with our children when we're talking about tough topics? And my answer is that I don't necessarily have a great answer because this really varies from child to child. I believe firmly that it is our responsibility as parents to teach our children constructive ways to deal with tough situations. That's a job that we have as their parent, is to help them navigate those things that are hard in life. But the answer to exactly how or when to do that, it really is different for every child. I loved this quote, and I feel like it gives us a place to start to understand what kids need And she talks about these tough topics as bad things. And oftentimes they are, right? The things that are hard to talk about often are, perceived as bad. So she says, bad things happen, just kind of stating a fact, right? And parents need to be armed with appropriate ways to deal with the bad things that happen. So we have to be able to deal with it as the parent, right? And help our child deal with the what, as well as the feelings that accompany the situation. So not only are we dealing with the what, like the specific event that might be tough, but we're also dealing with how our kids feel about that specific event or situation. This is the most significant sentence. Children need information, comfort, and understanding to help them process different experiences. Don't worry if you don't have all the answers. So notice she doesn't say children need all the information. Children need every piece of information. She just says children need information. And again, the way you're going to talk to a 5 or 6-year-old about a death in the family is going to be really different than the way that you talk to your senior in high school about the same death in the family. So depending on their age, depending on their maturity level, depending on the way they specifically process emotion and handle things that are challenging, is going to be different, right? But this is what all kids need. All kids need some information. They need facts, they need comfort, and they need understanding. And that's where we're going to head next. How do we do those things? So we're in the conversation. We're ready to talk about this. What do we actually do? What does that look like? So this is, if you can put a big star next to this one, listen to your child, because it's about them. We can process our own emotions separately. We can work through how we feel about the situation, right? But in the moment when we're talking to our child, it's about them. So listen. What do you hear them actually saying to you? Clarify what they really want to know. So let's say that they come home from school and say, I heard there's a war going on somewhere in the world, and I'm afraid, like, what if there's a war here? What's going to happen if there's a war here? That's really common for people of all ages. When something bad happens someplace, we begin to personalize and internalize that and think, okay, what if that same bad thing happens to me? What if that same bad thing begins to impact my life? So as they come to you and they say this, okay, what if war comes here? It might be simple for us to brush that off as a parent. Oh, it's not going to happen. You're fine. Don't worry about it. That's not what we want to do. Stop and really clarify what it is that they want to know. Ask them questions. So say something like, tell me more about what you heard at school, or tell me what you know is going on, or what you think you know about what's going on. And maybe I can help clarify some things for you. Let them be the guide. Ask as many questions as you can. And then as they answer, clarify to make sure you really understood what they meant. When you're providing information, when it's your turn to share some of those facts, because they do need information, right? You want to be simple and brief. And this, I think, applies to really any age child. You want to answer specific questions. So sometimes as adults, especially when it's something really heavy like war, our brains are processing up here, right? Our brains start thinking through all sorts of complex parts and pieces of what's happening in the world. But your child, what they really want to know might be at a level here. And so you want to make sure that you're answering their specific questions, but you don't have to offer a whole bunch of extra information, right? That may not be what they want to know. So it's important that we, again, loop back to that we're listening, that we're really truly hearing and understanding what it is our child is saying and what they're asking for, so that we know how to then answer. Be honest with them. This applies in lots of different ways. Sometimes we have to be honest and say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, but let's find out. Or, maybe when you dig into it a little bit more, maybe they don't actually want to know about the current event. They just want to be reassured that they're safe where they are. And comes to mind September 11th. I wasn't a parent when that happened back in 2001, but I was a teacher. And I remember having to consciously make the decision that I was going to be honest with my students as they asked questions. And so, when they said things like, "Are you afraid?" I said, it feels scary when something bad happens close to home in our country. And sometimes it feels scary when we don't know what's going to happen next. And so, yeah, there's times that sometimes I feel afraid. And then, encouraging them, if you want to know more, talk to your families, that kind of thing, but being honest with them about how I felt. Another thing that comes to mind is a recent event in our that hit our family. We had someone who really means a lot to our family pass away in the fall. And while this person was sick and in the hospital, our 5-year-old knew what was going on and said, "Is he going to die?" That's a hard question, right? And our gut response as parents, I think all of us, our initial response is we want to say, no, he's going to be just fine. Don't worry. I don't want you to worry about it at all. That's not something that you need to think about, right? That's what we want to say because we want them to be okay. But I also knew that the reality was it was very possible that he may. And so I didn't want to lie to my child and tell him it was going to be fine because I didn't know that it was. And so I just said, "You know what, honey? He might. And if he does, that's going to be really hard for us. And it's going to be really sad. And that's okay. And I promise that if that happens, we will let you know right away." That's a hard thing to be honest about. I didn't really want to say that to my 5-year-old, but at the same time, I knew it's what I needed to say. I knew it's what he needed to hear. And then when he did pass away and we had to tell our child, it was from a place of trust because he knew he could trust us to tell the truth. Honesty is so critical and important. But again, you don't have to share every single detail in order to be honest. And you, as the parent, get to decide where that line is and what is appropriate to be shared and what isn't. And it's also okay to say some of the details of this are details that are appropriate for grown-ups to handle. And so I'm not going to share those with you. And that's okay. Be sensitive to your children's needs. Some kids are going to ask more. They're going to dig a little bit more. They're going to need to know a little bit more than others. Some are going to need just kind of the bare minimum, some reassurance, and they're ready to move on. So really just be sensitive to what your specific child needs as you're talking. So whatever the topic is, that tough topic, it's going to come with big emotions more than likely, right? It's going to come with feelings that may be uncomfortable or new for them, especially the younger they are. And just to be really honest with all of you, navigating big emotions is hard enough for us in ourselves. It can be really hard to navigate with our children. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about our son. We don't want them to hurt, right? We want them to feel okay. And so letting them sit in a big emotion that feels hard is challenging for us as parents. We want to swoop in and we want to fix it and we want everything to be okay. And I am here to tell you that's not what our kids need. Our kids need us to be strong enough to sit in the yuck with them. Our kids need us to be strong enough to say, "You know what, we are going to walk through this. We are going to get through this together. You will not always feel this way." So there's so much I could say in regard to this. I tried to just pull some of the biggest pieces of strategy or advice I could give. So know that this is not an all-inclusive list about how we help our children process emotion, but I hope that it's some things that are helpful to you as you begin to dig in. The first thing that we all have to know, and I think we have to believe for ourselves and for our kids, is that feelings aren't good or bad. They just are. So you're really angry? Okay, it's okay. You're really, really sad. It's okay. You are so super happy you can't hardly contain yourself. It's okay, right? Any of those things are okay. It's how we deal with our feelings that becomes really important. A really practical example of this, we've got 2 boys and they love each other dearly and they can bring out some big emotions in each other. And if you have similar children, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean by that, right? So we will have conversations like, it's okay to be angry or frustrated or mad that your brother broke your Lego tower that you built. Absolutely. I understand why you feel that way. What's not okay is when you decide to hit him because of it or go break his because of it, right? So, however you feel is okay and you're entitled to that feeling. It's what you do with it that sometimes becomes not okay. So, how do we deal with these big emotions? Moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and others that are listening, kids don't naturally have the answer to this question. They need us. They need us as adults to dig in and teach this to them. So we can't ignore their big emotions. We have to help them process. And I said earlier, sometimes we have a tendency to want to brush it off because it doesn't feel like a big deal to us. It doesn't feel like something that shouldn't just bring up this big emotion. But for them, it does. And we have to validate that. So we begin by saying something like, I can see that you're really angry right now, and I want you to know that that's okay. Can I help you work through that? Instead of, what are you so angry for? This is not a big deal. It's just a Lego tower. Like, get over it. In my head, many times, that's what I have thought when I am dealing with my sons. It's going to take you 5 minutes. You're going to rebuild it. You're going to move on. And at the end of the day, you're not even going to remember that he knocked it over. So why are you so mad? Right? That's our kind of our gut as a parent. But when we respond that way, what we're saying to them is the way you feel is wrong. And we don't want to send that message. So it's okay to say, the way you handled it was wrong. Let's talk about that. But we never want to tell them how they feel is wrong. So you have to accept your child's emotions, where they are, and then move them forward through that. How do we do that? Again, listening. Listen to what they're actually saying to you, because my guess is when your son is mad because his brother kicked over the Lego tower, he's not really mad because he kicked over the Lego tower. He's mad because he feels like it's something he has worked so hard on, and then his brother was disrespectful to him or didn't really see and notice him, right? So he's not feeling valued. Speak to that. Don't just speak to the Lego tower. Or your child comes home from school and is, mad because nobody played with them at recess. And I don't like school and I don't want to go back there. Your child's not really angry. They're hurt. They're embarrassed. They feel lonely. Speak to that. Work on that, right? So we have to listen in order to understand what's really going on. And then this next one is really critical, but it doesn't happen in the moment. So putting words to emotions and reactions is very critical, because they can't talk to us about how they feel. They can't process how they feel if they can't tell us how they feel, right? So in times when they're not feeling the big emotion, we want to help them get words to it. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to actually show you a screen. You can take a screenshot or whatever of some examples of feeling words and some ways you may talk about that, how you might incorporate that into life outside the moment. But what we want to do is we want to help them be able to say, I'm feeling angry, because when they identify it, then we can do something with it, right? A great way to do that is for you to model that as the parent. Again, outside of, a situation when your kid's really mad, but maybe you're having dinner and you had a really bad day at work and you're telling them about it and you're telling them why it was a bad day and how you felt and what you did, because then they're watching, right? They're listening. Oh, okay. Well, dad had a bad day at work and he went outside and took a walk for a while and got some fresh air. And then he said he felt better. That's interesting. I wonder if I could try that. Right? They're going to be thinking those things. They may not say to you, man, dad, that's a great idea. I'm going to try that. But they're going to notice and they're going to think about it. And then reassure them that you're going to help them find ways to deal with how they feel. We are going to walk through this together. You are not alone. It is okay that you feel this way. And together we're going to walk through this. Not everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Because one, that's not always true. Everything is not always fine. And sometimes it is stuff that they're going to worry about, whether we tell them to or not. I don't know anyone at this point in my life who has stopped worrying because someone told them not to worry, right? So if it's on their heart, if it's weighing heavy on them, they're going to keep feeling that way if we don't help them navigate through it. I love this quote by Mr. Rogers: whatever is mentionable is manageable. If our kids can talk to us about it, then we can help them navigate through it. But if they can't talk to us about it, we can't help them. And I think tell them that. The minute they share it out loud, they will feel a release. They will feel just like this weight, right? Feels so good to just say it out loud, especially when you're saying it to someone who receives it and is willing to stand there with you. So this is an example, this question here. When you feel blank, what helps you to feel better? This is a great thing to talk to your child about. So again, outside of that, the specific instance where they're feeling the big emotion, you want to ask them like, hey, when you're feeling really sad, what makes you feel better? When you feel scared, what makes you feel better? This is helping your children to understand they do have some control over situations. They have some control over what happens in their lives, over the way that they feel. And in these tough topics, a lot of the things that I've mentioned, bad things going on in the world, bad things happening within your family, children tend to feel very out of control. They tend to feel like, maybe the grownups have all the control and they don't have any, or maybe nobody has any control. Giving them words for their feelings and helping them walk through what they can do to manage their feelings. Those are two ways that they can feel like they have some control over a situation. And that's really important. So this can be a tough one. And at some point, my guess is we are all going to experience a time when our kids won't talk to us for whatever reason. So my biggest encouragement to you, if this happens, is to just be patient and be really consistent in what you do. So continue to provide a safe place. Continue to let them know you're here whenever it is that they're ready. And this can be hard because, again, as I've mentioned, we want to help, right? We want to fix things for our kids. We don't want them to feel bad. We don't want them to be stuck dealing with hard things by themselves. But sometimes our kids need time to process, or sometimes they need some reassurance that it really is safe to tell us. So I will often say things to my kids like, I want to hear anything you want to tell me, even if it's hard for me to hear, or even if I might not like it. Because what if they've screwed up? What if they've made a really terrible choice? And they want to talk about it. They want to make it better. They need to know that if they come to you and they tell you, your initial response isn't going to be, oh, I can't believe you did something so stupid. What is wrong with you? How could you do that? Again, might be our initial thought as the parent, like, oh, I've raised you better than this, right? But what comes out should be, I'm so sorry that you are dealing with something so hard. I'm really proud of you for being honest and telling me, how can I support you in making this better? What do you need from me in order to make this better? And that conversation is never going to happen if they don't trust you and they don't feel like you're a safe place. So continually reminding them, hey, I'm here for anything you ever want to tell me, no matter what it is. Another thing that I've heard that I really loved is repeatedly reminding your kids when you tell them that you love them, saying to them, you know what? I love you no matter what you do, or no matter anything that could ever happen to you. I will always love you. That's huge, because what if something bad happens to them and they're embarrassed or they feel ashamed? They need to know you're going to love them. Again, if they screw up, they're going to need to know they can count on us, right? So continuing to provide that safe place is so important. Sometimes they really do want to talk. They just, in the moment, they don't want to talk to us. Sometimes talking to mom or dad just doesn't, it's not what they need. So offer suggestions of other trusted adults that they can talk to and be honest with them and say, hey, I get it. You may not be comfortable talking to me right now. And I am here for anything that you want to tell me. And I always want to hear it. And I will love you no matter what. But I understand if you want to process this with someone else too. You and your football coach have a really great relationship. Maybe he's somebody that you could talk to, or maybe there's somebody from your church, or, you provide some suggestions of adults that are going to guide them in a way that is how you want, and that they love your child too. And then a bit of an easier one is just for you to continue to share your own thoughts and feelings in a casual way, right? So around the dinner table, just continue to talk about how you're feeling when you pick them up from school, whatever. If that's becoming a natural part of what you're doing and how you're sharing, as parents, your kids are going to pick up on that and they're going to start to see like, okay, we're a family that talks about how we feel, right? We're a family that shares things with each other. Maybe they get to watch other siblings doing that or other people that come into your home sharing how they feel. Those connections are really important and help to build that feeling of safety for them. Oh, this is a big one for me because I always want to get it right. The perfectionist in me wants to, have a script, especially when a conversation is going to be hard. I want to know exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to think through what's my child going to say. Okay, here's how I'm going to react. It's all going to end with a nice hug. And, your 30-minute family sitcom, wrap up situation, right? Like I'm going to handle it perfectly. I'm having like visions of Full House when they have the conversation and the dad sits on the bed with DJ and, everything's good at the end. That doesn't always go like that in real life, right? What if we mess up? First of all, don't worry about it. Your child does not need a perfect parent. Your child just needs you to be their parent and to step up. And we have to be honest with them. So, there's times that I've had a conversation with my child about like maybe something happens at school, they're in trouble, and it shouldn't necessarily be a tough topic, but our kids getting in trouble at school can be hard. And we're having the conversation and maybe we get mad and we yell and we don't handle it well. And we have to go back later and say, you know what? I'm really sorry. I kind of let my emotions get the best of me. And that conversation was not productive. Can you forgive me? Or, maybe we don't get mad and yell, but maybe we just don't feel like we handled it well. And we have to go back and say, gosh, we were talking about that situation you heard about on the news. And I just don't feel like I handled that really well. I'm sorry. And can I maybe try again? There's some other things about it I would like to tell you, or some questions I'd like to ask you. Can we try again? And this is a big one. Put their needs first. Sometimes you don't feel great about it, but they're fine. They got what they needed. They got the answers that they needed, and they don't need you to go back and rehash it. Sometimes they do, even though you feel like, man, I handled that the very best I could have handled it. They need more. So you need to be aware and in tune with what your child is feeling and put their needs before your own, because we as parents, we can handle our own stuff separately, right? At another time, we need to worry about how are they feeling? What do they need in the moment? And what do I need to do to step up as their parent in that situation? So sometimes this means that we just have to ask them, what do you need from me right now? And it might be different. So in the fall, when our family was dealing with that loss that I mentioned, each of our children processed that differently, and they needed different things from us. And for our 5-year-old, that's a lot like me and is a verbal processor, it was lots of bedtime conversation about lots of big questions. And sometimes they were totally out of the blue. And sometimes they were expected. But I had to be ready to put his needs first and to not push that aside. Like, okay, it's bedtime. We're not going to talk about this tonight. I had to just think in this moment, is it more important that he's getting to bed on time, or is it more important that he's being heard and that he feels like he's getting some information that he needs? So I mentioned earlier that putting the words to our feelings, right, and building vocabulary. So that's where we're going to wrap up our conversation. This is a list of obviously not every emotion word, but lots of words that you can start to use beyond just I'm happy, I'm mad, I'm angry, whatever, but to really start to identify clearly how you're feeling in situations. Another thing that I would highly recommend is that you talk about how your body feels when you feel these words. So if I pick one, if you're uncomfortable in a situation, how does your body feel? Gosh, that's really important for us to help teach our kids, right? I especially think about our, young adolescents, and the first time they're in situations where maybe they shouldn't be, or they're around things they shouldn't be around, and they get that feeling of discomfort, right? Of uncomfortableness, where they start to think like, oh, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I should be doing this. Okay, what's happening in their body? So having those conversations again ahead of time, because if you've never talked to them about it, then they don't know that racing heart and that upset stomach and that anxious kind of antsy feeling in their body is their body saying, you are not comfortable, something is wrong, right? What does it feel like when they feel excited in a good way, right? How does that feel in their body? Talking through all of these things, both putting the word to the emotion and identifying physically how your body reacts to some of these emotions. A great way to do this is to use books. So when you're reading with your child, which I highly recommend all parents do for all ages of kiddos, and you're talking about the characters in the book, maybe, the character stomps up the stairs and slams the door and screams out loud. And you can say, oh gosh, how's he feeling right now? Like, what's going on? And let them say. And then if they're like, I don't know, that's a great time for you to talk about the physical things that he was showing, the stomping, the slamming, the whatever. And when you're doing those things, do you think he was happy? Do you think he was angry or sad, or, and then you beginning to have those conversations, or a character that's extremely, feeling a positive way. Books provide all sorts of opportunities to talk about that. And the cool thing is, a lot of times authors, especially as you get into a little bit more complex writing, they're not going to identify the emotion with the word always. They're going to paint the picture for you so that you as the reader can imagine what's happening, right? So if a character is feeling courageous, that word just jumped out at me, the author may not say, and then the character felt very courageous, and so he went and did this brave thing. But maybe it's going to say he, stood up straight and pushed his shoulders back and thought to himself, you know what, I can do this hard thing, whatever. And then you can show your child, this is a great example of a time that someone was feeling courage. Notice what was happening in their body. Notice what they did. Notice the kinds of things that they said, whatever. And then also outside of books, you want to name your feelings as a parent. And I've mentioned that, but the more that we can model to our kids, maybe you snap at them and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I snapped at you. I don't have a lot of patience right now. I'm feeling impatient because I'm frustrated with XYZ that's going on. And just putting words to it so that they begin to hear it in their lives. I love that. And then ask about their feelings a lot, not just when you're in the middle of these hard conversations or when they probably are feeling a really big emotion, but when they're just feeling everyday emotions. Something my family does around the dinner table is we talk about highs and lows. And high, what was the best part of your day? Low, what was the worst part of your day or the most challenging part of your day? And oftentimes we'll accompany that with something like, and how'd you feel about that? Or how did that make you feel? So, this has been said, I didn't have anybody to play with at recess today. Ooh, how'd that make you feel? Instead of you as the parent putting on the child how they feel, like, oh, you must have felt sad. Don't say that. Instead say, and how did you feel about that? Because maybe they actually, were okay with it. Actually, today I was really tired and it was kind of nice to just have some quiet time. Or, I felt really sad and I'm not sure why nobody wanted to play with me, or my feelings were hurt, or, whatever that looks like, but just opening up that daily conversation so that it's not only reserved for, hey, we talk about emotions when there's this big thing going on. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for just digging into potentially something that's challenging as a parent. Like I said at the beginning, my goal really was that you could walk away from our time together feeling like you had some easily usable strategies so that you can turn right around and begin to have some important conversations with your kids. So thank you again, and I hope that you found our time valuable.